On today's episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast, we are going to break down the most recent commitment for the Louisville football program. Wide receiver Cataurus Hicks is the 15th member of the Flyville 23 class. Let's discuss everything you need to know and more on this episode of the show. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Happy Tuesday. Welcome into another episode of the Locked On the Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I serve as a credentialed media member for Cardinals Sports Zone. I also do some PA announcing work for the university in various sports. I want to take this time to say thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On the Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, including YouTube and WHAS 11+. 5 days a week, your team, every day. A new commitment to discuss for the Louisville football program, this time in the form of Miami wide receiver Cataurus Hicks. We will discuss what that commitment means for the program moving forward. We will also get back into the loss against Florida State. This will be the last time we talk about the Florida State loss. I want to talk about some of the improvements we saw in that matchup while also discussing what the team still needs to improve on ahead of the Week 4 matchup against South Florida. So, but beginning in the recruiting realm, and before we do that, just so you know, I recorded the Curtis Williams episode and this episode back-to-back in the same evening. So if you're sitting there, oh, he's got the same shirt on for the Monday episode as the Tuesday episode, relax. It's not that deep. I basically was just kind of feeling lazy, didn't feel like changing shirts if I was just going to record again. So just a public service announcement for those who wanted to be, a little picky. So, but in terms of this commitment for Louisville, it was one that was pretty much put into motion very, very quickly. The Cardinals offered Cataurus Hicks back on August 30th, visited unofficially for the game against Florida State, and 2 days later committed to the University of Louisville. So in the span of a couple weeks, the Cardinals picked up their 15th commitment, the first commitment in over a month. The most recent commitment before that was his teammate, linebacker Stanquan Clark, who was also in attendance for the matchup against the Florida State Seminoles. So Cataurus Hicks, a sort of underrated prospect from the South Florida area, a standout of Miami Central. He's had a fantastic start to his senior season, scored a touchdown in a big upset win over IMG Academy, and a handful of other touchdowns throughout the early part of this season. Stop me if you've heard this one before, but speedster Miami wide receiver goes to Louisville. Obviously 5'9", 160 pounds. We've seen the blueprint of how, speedsters from the South Florida area, wide receivers can come into this Louisville program and really make a name for themselves. I mean, it goes back, all over, Charlie Strong's tenure to, even, Bobby's tenure, and even now into Scott Satterfield's tenure. I need to see where this certain player's from before I mention him, because I'm not sure if he's from the South Florida area or not. Let's see. No, never mind. He is not from the state of Florida at all, so that would not make sense at all. So, but regardless, you get what I'm saying. Obviously, you have Eli Rogers, you have Tutu Atwell most notably, and now with Cataurus Hicks, smaller receiver that fits in with Scott Satterfield's scheme. And I know what the elephant in the room is. There is an uncertainty of whether or not Scott Satterfield will be here for year 5 in the fall of 2023. So at this point, I'm going to operate under the assumption that he is, while acknowledging the possibility that he may not be. And it may be a new head coach, but I think Cataurus Hicks has some valuable skills like, being able to, create some separation at the line of scrimmage, make defenders miss with his speed, and has, a solid ability to get into that second level of the defense. A solid route runner. Footwork is key here when you watch the film over the past couple weeks and even in his junior season. Just a nightmare for opposing defensive backs because he's extremely quick. When he gets the ball in his hands, it's extremely tough to bring him down, and it's really, really dangerous if you give him some space to operate with. Has shown out against some very, very quality defensive backs like at IMG Academy that have two of the top cornerbacks in the 2024 class among some other standouts, and he looked really, really good in that game against IMG Academy. Has looked good throughout this season. An underrated prospect in the state of Florida, especially in the South Florida area. A lot of people are like, well, is he a preferred walk-on? Is he going to be a guy that gets processed later on? I don't think that's the case at all. He's first of all, he's going to be getting a scholarship. Second of all, I don't think he gets processed. I think that this is a solid commitment for Louisville. Just because it's not a 4-star doesn't mean that it's not a good commitment, because if you really go back over the past 10 years or so, Louisville has done a great job with some unheralded prospects that have, kind of been diamonds in the rough. Now, not every prospect that fits that mold goes out to be, a star at the next level. And I'm not saying or implying that Cataurus Hicks is going to be a star at the next level, but I do think that, he's going to be a very quality receiver. I don't mind taking a flyer on Hicks because according to Andrew Ivins of 24/7 Sports, he's going to be ranked in the next recruiting update. He said this, I'm reading off of Cardinal Authority, the 24/7 Sports site. According to 24/7 Sports national analyst Andrew Ivins, Hicks is, quote unquote, putting together a strong senior season. Obviously, I think that visit played a big-time role. He told Cardinal Authority, "I love the atmosphere, and I feel like they're missing a part in their offense. And I can fulfill the part that they're missing. What made me commit was the coaches made me feel wanted at home, and they love Florida guys." So, obviously, I mentioned that South Florida or even Florida connection to Louisville, that pipeline forming once again. Stanquan Clark's commitment was big. William Fowles out of the South Florida area. Jordan Church from IMG Academy. Let's see, Raekwon Adkins from the Miami area. So this is the fifth prospect from the state of Florida in this class, and that's big. A third of the prospects are from Florida. A third of the prospects are from California, and that's just wild to even sit back and think about. And then you have some others that are from Georgia, so on and so forth. So at the end of the day, I'm not saying that geography is the end all be all, but when you're getting players from California, Texas, Georgia, Florida, known for being national hotbeds in recruiting, that's definitely some big time stuff. Hicks' commitment makes the Cardinals, puts the Cardinals in 17th in the country. 15 commitments. You have to understand that they are still going to rise up, assuming that there is no, decommitments, which there possibly will be, but you just never know with every class. Hicks is the fourth wide receiving commitment at this time, to go along the lines with 4-star receivers William Fowles, DeAndre Moore Jr., Jaleel McClain, high 3-star, and now Cataurus Hicks. So, McClain and DeAndre Moore kind of in the same body range as 5'10" to 6 foot. William Fowles a little bit bigger at 6'2", more of a boundary wide receiver. Playing on the outside. DeAndre Moore can play anywhere on the field. Jaleel McClain more of in the slot, and I think that Cataurus Hicks could kind of fill that Tutu role. Maybe not necessarily, obviously, as explosive as Tutu was, but used in the screen game. Maybe adding that deep ball threat that Louisville has been missing since the departure of Tyler Harrell, or even end arounds, trick plays, just something to get the ball in the hands of a speedy wide receiver. So I like this commitment. I think that Hicks is going to rise up the rankings to where he's going to be a 3-star comfortably. I look, I get the hesitancy. Is like, oh well, The guy's not even ranked. I mean, when you look at his offers, I mean, you're not necessarily looking at a ton of high major programs. In fact, I think Louisville and Tennessee are the only Power Five programs that have offered him scholarships, and there's questions of whether or not he was even a take at Tennessee. I'm not sure. But the two-star athlete also runs track as well. But it's a huge commitment. I think that another aspect of this that we're not talking about is they're continuing that Miami pipeline into Louisville. Stanquan Clark, Cataurus Hicks, both in attendance, teammates of Miami Central. The other Miami Central teammate that was there was top 100 edge rusher Ruben Bain. The defensive lineman has been a high priority for this Louisville recruiting efforts in the 2023 class, one of the best defensive linemen in the country. So that may go play a little bit of a factor in Bain's recruitment. I know that he is kind of seen as a heavy Miami lean, but at this point in time, if you're able to try to sway Ruben Bain as well, I'm not saying that they took Cataurus Hicks just to try to sway Ruben Bain, but it definitely cannot hurt you to possibly get Bain or even get closer in his recruitment. So I like this commitment. I think that it is a get in this recruitment before the big boys do type of recruitment. Because I think the Cataurus Hicks stock is going to blow up as the season goes on, and he continues to show out. Because I think it's common for big time players to kind of get lost by the wayside when it comes to scouting. A hotbed of talent: Miami, Atlanta, LA, Texas, Houston, all of that mix. So I like this commitment. We'll continue to talk recruiting news whenever we get it. But for the remainder of the show, I want to go back to that Florida State matchup and talk about first, we'll talk about where we saw improvement in week 3, some positives we saw. We'll do that here in just a second after we talk about our friends over at Upside. From cringing at the pump to getting an eye-opening check at your favorite restaurant, inflation is hitting us all where it hurts, and it really hurts. That's why I started using Upside. Upside is an incredible app for anyone who buys gas, groceries, or dines out. With every purchase, I'm earning cash back thanks to Upside. With my new job, I'm traveling more than ever. I'm out on the road a lot. Gas, I've been purchasing at a rate that I never have before. I'm eating out a lot. Upside has been a no-brainer for me. So you can get started too. Download the free Upside app. Use my promo code LOCKED and get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. Claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside. Check in at the business, pay as usual with a credit or debit card, and get paid. In comparison to other credit card rewards or loyalty programs, you can earn 3 times more cash back with Upside. Upside users are earning more than $1 million every week collectively. That's probably why they have a 4.8 star rating on the App Store. So it's time to download the free Upside app. Use the promo code LOCKED to get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. That's $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more using the promo code LOCKED. So, full disclosure, when we are about to talk about positives that we saw from week 3, improvements that we saw between week 2 and week 3, I'm going to get some crap from, people on YouTube, people on social media perhaps, because oh, well, they didn't win. Duh, they didn't win. If you remember on yesterday's episode, I literally said in the last segment, the team showed improvement, but it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things because the results weren't there. So I'm going to make this disclaimer again that, yes, you can believe that you can acknowledge the improvements that were made, the positives that we're seeing, but also understand that in the grand scheme of things, they don't hold a ton of weight if you don't get the results. Now, obviously, there were some solid things that the team can build on, and they've got better week in, week out, but they still have to get the results. They can get better in week 4 against South Florida, but if they lose, it does not matter because it's all about getting the wins and staying out of the loss column, respectively, obviously. So getting that out of the way, I still think that it's critical that we do talk about what the team has been doing a little bit better in terms of week 3. When you look at what the team did, we'll start offensively. I think that for starters, the offensive line played better than I hoped they would. I know that Florida State's defensive line is one of the best that the Cardinals will play this season, one of the best in the country. The Louisville defense actually had more sacks, quarterback pressures, tackles for loss, so on and so forth against Florida State than the other way around. The defense of the Seminoles only had 3 quarterback hurries, and 2 of those ended up being sacks. I thought that the Louisville offensive line did pretty decently passing wise. Sure, there was some times where Malik Cunningham needed to hit his man a little better, but I didn't mind the play calling, especially in the first half. I thought that Scott Satterfield diversified the play calling and kind of mixed in, some RPOs, some running plays, but also into some passing plays that we hadn't seen in the first 2 weeks. And Malik Cunningham in the first half looked comfortable in executing in that. And I think that 6 different receivers all received targets in this game, something that we just didn't see in week 1 or in week 2. It was kind of not as spread out as it was week 3. So Louisville is making it an effort to go to different receivers. Malik Cunningham is making it an effort to find different receivers. I thought that they kept the Florida State defense on their toes in the first half. Obviously, second half a little bit different. Some drives stalled out. It seems like the play calling got a little bit conservative, especially in the fourth quarter. But ultimately, I think that, in the first half, we saw what we've kind of been hoping for, and that's a solid passing attack. Running the ball, the team is starting to set the tone at the line of scrimmage. Cardinals averaged over are nearly 6 yards per carry, 44 carries, 252 yards, 3 touchdowns on the ground. Malik Cunningham looked very solid in that regard. Looked like the Malik Cunningham of last season. So that's something to appreciate, is the fact that Louisville is starting to, it's one thing to try to implement the run when it's not working, but when it's working, you can get away with a lot of stuff. Second and long, they weren't necessarily throwing the ball as much. I think that, you had your fair share of runs on 1st and 10, which it is what it is, but I also thought that they made some strides to kind of switch some things up. So offensively, some good things to look at there. Defensively, got a lot of pressure on the opposing ball carriers for Florida State, had 10 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, 2 quarterback pressures, and overall, I thought that the front 7 looked solid. Yasir Abdullah had a Yasir Abdullah type game, half a sack, 2 tackles for loss. Yaya Diaby was huge in this one, a sack and a half, 2.5 tackles for loss. Des Tell was a guy that I think needed to have a big game. He had 4 tackles, but one of those was 1.5 tackles for loss and 1 sack. So some big time moments from the defensive line there. They made things tough for the Florida State offensive line, one that's a little bit banged up, and they also made life tough, at times for Jordan Travis and Tate Rodemaker. The issue is that the secondary struggled pretty much all night in this one. But I think that, defensive back wise, we talk about, Brian Brown's scheme, but I honestly felt like we saw defensive backs play more up on the line of scrimmage, in more of a man setting, pressing at the line of scrimmage. So that's something to focus on moving forward. I think that we saw some good stuff from the defense. They forced turnovers. They forced, I think it was. Okay, I'm completely losing my mind. They forced 2 turnovers. They had the tip turnover, and then they had the one toward the end of the first half. But ultimately, I think that this was a better defensive effort. Not as good as the one against Central Florida, obviously, but still pretty solid regardless. So, pretty solid from a pass rushing standpoint. We need to talk about improvements now to our pass defense is probably at the forefront there. We'll do that here in just a second. I want to say thank you first for once again making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, including YouTube and WHAS 11 Plus, which you can find at WHAS11.com. Scroll down to the sports section, and you can find all of the Locked On Louisville podcast episodes with 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, your team every day. So, like I mentioned, it's important to focus on some of the things that the team did positively, but understanding that if you don't get the results, that it truly doesn't matter too much. Now, in terms of what the team needs to improve on ahead of week 4, unfortunately, it seems like it's the same things week in, week out. It's the consistency aspect of it. It's staying consistent throughout 4 quarters of football. It is limiting penalties. It's staying disciplined when it comes to, holding on to the football, not turning the football over, converting on turnovers, making teams pay for giving up short field position. Just the whole collective aspect of the little things like penalties. I mean, the Cardinals had 11 penalties for 81 yards. That's something that has to completely be cleaned up. They had a lot of penalties against Central Florida as well. They turned the ball over multiple times in some costly positions. Now one of those turnovers was an instance to where it could have been ruled down by forward progress, but at the end of the day, it was not. So, but passing defense was one of the biggest things here. Louisville struggled in that department. Like I said, Kendrick Duncan Jr., Jarvis Brownlee Jr., probably games that both of these guys would like to have back that they're looking to put behind them. When you saw that the coverage against Johnny Wilson wasn't really working early on, I wish we could have seen a personnel change or something switched up to where you weren't trying the same thing against Wilson throughout the whole entirety of the game, because he ended up, pretty much having almost a career day. He was 7 for 149 with 2 touchdowns, and all the other receivers, none of them had over 50 yards. So he was pretty much the guy that was hurting you the most. I think that tackling was an issue at times. There was a play in particular to where Louisville, it seemed like the opposing ball carrier was going to run out of bounds. And Louisville's guys kind of let up, but he ended up just cutting up field and getting about 40 more yards, or something like that. Maybe not 40, but regardless, you get what I'm putting down. Overall, just not necessarily a good performance from the Louisville secondary. A lot of these were broken down plays, and look, I get it. Being a defensive back is one of the toughest positions to play in football. Covering a opposing receiver when a play breaks down for an extended period of time is extremely difficult, but Florida State made too many plays too often when plays broke down. Louisville's defensive backs, extended drives with, costly pass interference penalties, holding penalties. And that kind of goes back to that discipline aspect of it in terms of not, shooting yourself in the foot when it comes to penalties and turnovers and what have you. But I think that, there were a ton of opportunities in this game and finishing. Like I said, I think that the improvement aspect of this game that needs to be focused on ahead of week 4, look, it's nothing new for this team, and that's alarming. That's something that you're looking at and you're like, oh, it's been a problem for the past 3 years, right? And I think that something needs to change, and this team needs to get better at the closing aspect of the game, finishing out games. And I think that whatever Scott Satterfield and company need to do to change things up to ensure that need to be done. Like I said, I'm not a coach, so I'm not going to sit here and offer suggestions on Scott Satterfield and them trying to do their jobs. But at the end of the day, we've been seeing a recurring issue over the past 3 seasons. And look, Louisville fans they're just done with it. They shouldn't have to deal with it, for 3 years. I get that. I get the frustration. Hopefully, we see some improvements across all aspects of handling the little things against South Florida. Offensively, I'd like to see. I think that defensively, honestly, the defense has been more of a positive than the offense has. We're still seeing some kind of lackluster offense. We need to see more consistency. Malik Cunningham needs to complete some easy throws. Louisville's wide receivers need to, haul in some catches that hit them in the hands. And obviously, maybe I'm nitpicking here, but I think that it's a valid criticism. I think that Louisville needs to just continue to be consistent in moving the football and just doing a better job of converting into points, taking advantage of other teams' offenses stalling out. And I think that would go a long way in Louisville to kind of get closer to winning games and things of that nature. So, I think that's kind of where I'm at. But it's a matter of limiting turnovers, holding on to the football, ball security, limiting penalties, not shooting yourselves in the foot, and obviously on the other end of the things, converting on turnovers as well. Passing defense has to be better. They have to do a better job of marking, do a better job of tackling. We saw some positives in the pass rush. Rushing the ball wise, Florida State did run for over 5 yards per carry, but almost 100 yards less than their season average. But they got beat by a backup quarterback, and that's something that shouldn't happen for this team. So it's a matter of working on the things that we talk about every single week. So hopefully we see some improvement ahead of the Week 4 matchup against the South Florida Bulls. So. But that's going to wrap up this Tuesday edition of the show. Do yourself a favor, check out the Locked On ACC podcast hosted by Candace Cooper. No better way to get your conference news than that show 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, as I mentioned. Thanks again for making Locked On the Louisville your first listen every day. Tomorrow's episode, we are going to talk about the opening line spread by BetOnline for the game against South Florida. The Cardinals open up as a double-digit favorite. We'll talk about how good the Bulls are. We will also dive into the weekly mailbag. So if you have any questions, go ahead and be sure to get them in. You can hit up my Twitter at @defense_. You can comment them under in the comments on the YouTube page, or you can hit up the Locked On Louisville Twitter page at @LO_Louisville. But that's going to wrap up this Tuesday edition. As I said, everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here